The number of friends that I've had growing up that have convinced themselves and other people by looking at these surface level, misleading college admission statistics that you can just easily get into med school. It doesn't matter what undergrad university you go to, just going to some big name school is going to get you there, is honestly appalling. I'm shocked at the number of people that buy into this. And so in this video, I've put together two elaborate case studies in order to end this debate right now. I want you guys to see into some of the misleading and almost fraudulent practices that these colleges do in the information they put out there that leads so many thousands and thousands of high schoolers like us down the wrong path. This is not meant to be some drawn out clickbait video. If you watch for the next couple of minutes, my goal is to give you a perspective into this college admissions scheme that nobody else has. My first case study involves Oregon State University. If you don't know me personally, I'm from Portland, Oregon, so this is the local state school that a lot of people in my school and in my local area go to. But the same type of logic can be applied to almost every single state school across the country. If you go to the Oregon State University website and you're just doing your basic introductory pre-med research, you're likely bound to come across the statistic or the question, well, how many students from a school like OSU really get into med schools? Now, before we dive into this information, what we have to acknowledge is the basic information about this. So if you're new to doing some of this pre-med research, according to the American Association of Med Schools, roughly 40% of applicants get into med school each year. Now, this statistic includes all of the people applying to med school, and it's giving a baseline for people who have gone into at least one. So out of the people who apply directly out of college on their first try, people who have taken one gap year, 2, 3, who are applying in their 40s, out of all of those people, 40% of people, and now the number is declining, so in recent years it's been dipping into 38 and the high 30%, people in this group, right, in that sub 40% group, get into at least one med school. That's what the statistic means. And so if you go to the Oregon State University website and you do the research, okay, how many Oregon State University grads get into med school in comparison to this, what you'll find is on the website, they claim that 60 to 70% of people get into med school. Now this begs an interesting question. We're not talking about Harvard or Ivy League institutions or the small liberal arts colleges that I so often and heavily preach on this channel. We're talking about the most general state school here having numbers that are significantly greater than the national average. Now, how is this possible? The reason I'm stressing this so much is because I've had so many friends come to me with this piece of information telling me, Pratik, if you go to Oregon State University, 60 to 70% of people get in. I've had my own closest friends tell me this. And so I need to explain to you why this is not the case. We have a couple key points to consider here. First of all, a lot of information regarding this 60 to 70% statistic is left out. The American Medical College Association, when they put out that statistic of 38% of people in 2020 or 2021 got into med school, that's on an annual basis. If we take a look at the statistic that Oregon State University is putting out there, they don't give us any assurance in that regard. What this 60 to 70% of people is likely referring to is people that are applying on their first try directly out of college. People that have taken one gap year, 2, 3, an infinite number. Out of all of these grads that are coming out of OSU who have, keep in mind, already graduated down the pre-med track. They're applying to med school. They're committed to this. 60 to 70% of them are getting into med schools. Now, here's the scary part. Let's flip the script for a second. If 60 to 70% of people in total are getting in, that means that out of all the people who are committed to this med school track, 30 to 40% aren't getting in. Can you imagine that for a second? You've gone through all the work of the pre-med track, right? You've done your 4 years, your MCAT, you've applied to med school, and even after taking gap years and applying, you're part of that 30 to 40% of people that can't get in. What are you supposed to do with your life from there? Now, there's tons of different things that you can, of course, do with your degree, but if you come from an immigrant household like mine, this is one of the biggest fears that your parents will likely bring up to you as soon as you say you want to become a doctor, right? What happens if it doesn't work out? Immediately, people go to this 60 to 70% statistic and they assume all kinds of things from it. But now you can start to see how there's a little bit of deception going on here. A good portion, right, 30 to 40%, are not going anywhere with this med school degree. They're living very, very non-doctor lives, versus the people who do end up going to med school, that is likely after several gap years, and there's no guarantee what the future of this will look like. For our second case study, things get a little bit more technical. Now I want to move to the other end of the spectrum, and let's take a look at some of the information that Harvard University is putting out there, right? This is arguably in my opinion, the most marketed pre-med school out there, and for a lot of people who don't dig super deeply into this college admissions, this would be like their immediate go-to pre-med school. They would drop the school they're attending right now or that they're going to attend in order to go to Harvard pre-med. But let's take a look at some of the things that they do. Now, if you look up these same statistics that you'd look up for OSU for Harvard University, you'll find that they boast a pre-med to med school acceptance rate of between 93 and 95%. Now, Harvard is subject to the exact same analysis that we did with OSU. These students could be applying after several years, there's no specifications with that, but what we find with Harvard is that when you get to an institution of that level, there's a sort of standard that they have to maintain. You'd expect that a school like Harvard is able to get kids into med school at that level, and so you'll find that they do some other scummy tactics with their statistics in order to get their numbers up that high. If you Google Harvard pre-med med school admissions rates, you'll notice that every time they bring up that statistic, that 93% or that 95%, it's always prefaced by saying that this applies to students with a GPA of above 3.5. Now, why do they do that? At first, it doesn't seem super significant. After all, a 3.5 GPA is not that high, right? Or is it? On screen right now, you'll see a table from the Med School Statistics Report of Vanderbilt University, another Tier 1 institution. Now, if you take a look at the table, you'll find that out of the graduating pre-med class that's applying to med schools, those students that had less than a 3.5 GPA struggled significantly to get into med schools. Their acceptance rate was less than 40%. It was less than the national average at a Tier 1 institution, versus the students who had over a 3.5 GPA who were much, much more successful at getting into med school. Now take a look at the ratio of students who had this GPA range. You'll notice that 30% of the students in this Vanderbilt class had less than a 3.5 GPA. 30%. Now, Harvard and Vanderbilt, if you try to go do the statistics digging online, you'll find that they have very comparable GPAs. This leads to a pretty logical conclusion. If students under a 3.5 GPA are performing poorly, and Harvard is cutting them out, and roughly 30% of the students are in this batch, then by strategically dropping out the statistics of the bottom 25 to 30% of Harvard's graduating class, they're able to significantly inflate the acceptance rates of their higher up top students. The reason their numbers are that high are because they're just gutting the lower part of the class. And now it doesn't seem so impressive, is it? If you take any class at any school and you remove the bottom chunk of students, of course the percentages are going to go so much more in favor of the school. It's not that hard to get the top students in versus the bottom students, and that's why it's so much easier for Harvard to put up numbers in that high 90% range. Suddenly that 93% doesn't seem so surprising, and we haven't even brought up the fact that this is a Harvard, right? These students are some of the best in the country. That's the bar that they're at, and Harvard is still cutting out the lowest of them. We're talking about cutting out the bottom of the top 1%. I can go on and on talking about the other statistical metrics they use to discriminate the lower part of the kids, or the fact that none of the statistics I've brought up in this video account for the actual quality of the med schools that students get into. This could be the most random med school for all we care, right? This is just any med school. But my point here has been made. So to bring things back to a more positive note, not every school throws out misleading statistics like this. If anything, the reason that I was able to even bring up the point about Vanderbilt University is because they have slightly increased clarity in regards to their med school placement rates. However, the statistics very well could have still been hand selected. A wise man once told me that if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. And that's the main takeaway of this video. Thank you all so much for watching. This has been Pratik. Peace out. Take care and stay woke.